Good morning, everybody. It's good to be back here at Chestnut Mountain. I was trying to remember when I was here before, and I don't really remember, but I guess it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But we have, David and I have lived in several places in Europe. We started in Bulgaria, and then we moved to Ukraine, and now we're in Greece. But I do remember a great connection with Chestnut Mountain. When we were living in Bulgaria, a team came and my apartment really needed painting. And I'm not a painter, but a couple ladies from your church just were willing to volunteer and paint my apartment, and it was great. So we really appreciate the prayers and the support that we've received from Chestnut Mountain over the years, and just in the past couple of days talking with many of you and having you ask about us and about our children and our lives personally. For a missionary, that really means a lot, because that means that you really know us well and pray for us, and that's really important. What I want to share today, it's great what Donna shared. I really resonate with that. I really appreciate that, and I think what I'm going to share is similar. As Sarah said, we've lived in. I've lived I've lived overseas most of my adult life. I felt called to missions when I was in college, and left to go to the field shortly after college. So pretty much my whole adult life I've lived overseas. Greece is the 8th country that I've lived in. 5 of those were as a single person, working in different various Muslim contexts, Arabic-speaking Muslim contexts. And then I married David, and we moved to Eastern Europe and spent quite a few years in Bulgaria, and then moved to Ukraine for another 5 or 6 years. And then after our kids had gone back to the States to university, we moved to Greece primarily to work with Middle Eastern refugees. So I know a little bit about living in tents and transition and moving around. But I wanted to share something from Jeremiah. This is Jeremiah 29, and these are some verses that I have really clung to over the years, because God has led me to different places with different job descriptions and different living situations, different neighbors, and different ministries. And so it's been a little bit like being in exile. I'm just a little bit about me personally, because I did want to share a little more about who I am, not just what I do. I am a missionary, but I'm not some weird, strange creature from another planet. I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, and so I'm a Georgia girl, and grew up in the South. My husband did as well. When we come back to the States, we love driving around Georgia and, seeing the farms and the cows and the pickup trucks and the deer processing signs and the, kudzu and, all that stuff. This is really our home on this earth anyway. But we've lived for, quite a few years in exile, as it were, not in Georgia. And these are some verses from Jeremiah. These are the words of the letter that Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem to the surviving elders of the exiles, and to the priests, the prophets, and all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had taken into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. So these were the Israelites whose home was in Jerusalem, and now found themselves in another country very different from their own. They didn't go there by choice. But this is what the letter says. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. And I can say, I'm a bit older now. I think David and I have maybe one more term in us, and then we'll be thinking about a retirement. But I think in these years of living in exile, for us, thankfully, pretty much voluntary exile, not forced exile. But God has called us really to do a variety of things. But I think primarily it is to seek the welfare of the people around us. Most of the places where I've lived and then where we've lived as a family have been places where there were not many believers at all. So we had to be creative and think about, how can we reach these people? As Donna said, she's an English teacher. Actually, so am I. And we use English teaching as an avenue for connecting with non-believers and then to build relationships with them and share the gospel with them and hopefully see them come and be part of a growing church, of a church plant. So we have to be creative and think, how can we, in exile, seek the welfare of our city? And I think about that a lot because in Greece, Greek people are not really receptive to believers, to Christians, evangelical Christians. They think of us as a sect. Most of the country is Greek Orthodox. It's a tradition. You're born Orthodox, you die Orthodox. It's more of an ethnicity almost than a faith. So a lot of them are not receptive. They're not interested. They think we have our church. We're good. Thank you very much. So we have to be, creative. But we can seek the welfare of our city. And we do try to do that, whether it's teaching English or, just being a good neighbor in different kind of ways. So, my point is that that's the same for all of you. Some of you, I don't know, some of you might be living in exile here in Flowery Branch. I don't know. For some of you, it might really be exile. For some of you, it might be home. I don't know. But, but I do know that for all of us, finally, we're headed to Zion. We're headed back to our heavenly home. And whether we are a Middle Eastern refugee in Greece, or we're someone who's been trafficked to Athens from her country to work in the sex industry, or whether we're living in Flowery Branch or wherever, that we can seek the welfare of our city and ask God to bless it. And that is something that we can always do. So just a little bit, that's a little bit about like who I am, a little bit about what we do. Some of you have heard David speak in the round robin and in a couple other places, or you get our news prayer letter emails. So we serve with a very, very small Greek church who has a vision for helping the many, many refugees that come to Greece. It started in about 2015, 2016. A flood of refugees came in from Afghanistan, from Iran, from Turkey and Syria, places that were either where there was political strife or civil war, or where believers in a Muslim context had been persecuted, the Taliban, Islamic regime, many different reasons. And they came across through Turkey. If you can visualize on your map, kind of Asia coming through Turkey. You get to the western edge of Turkey and it's the Aegean Sea, and not just a couple kilometers off of that are Greek islands. So refugees began to come that way, and they would, I'm sure you saw on the news, they would get in these overfull rubber rafts and try to make it to an island, and then eventually make their way to Greece. And A lot of them wanted to go on to Western Europe, where many of them have family. But Greece has becomes a bit of a logjam for refugees because they're not well received in Greece. They're not well received in the European Union. Turkey doesn't want them to go back that way. And they can't go home because their homes have been destroyed, or it's too dangerous, they'll be killed or put in prison. So it's a difficult place. But God has opened the door in Greece for Christian workers and ministries to come and serve these Middle Eastern refugees, and many of them Muslims, to hear the gospel for the first time. And they're free to do so. And God is really doing some cool things. So our little church, just quickly, the denomination owned an old apartment building and kind of south of Athens, and it was in good enough shape where they could sort of rebuild it to have about 12 rooms. Imagine like a tiny motel room with a little shower, toilet, sink for every family group, and then 2 kitchens that they share on 2 floors and shared kind of living room space. So for most of these people that come into this house, they're the most vulnerable. Moms with small children who are alone, or families with babies, or sick people who are sick, who have been living literally on the street, in a park, in an abandoned building in downtown Athens, and are very, very vulnerable. So these are the people that we work with. And what does that mean, work with? Well, David and I have the fun job because we're their English teachers. We don't live in the building, but we live very close. So we just hang out with them. We celebrate birthdays. We have women's groups together where we drink tea and they make crafts. Sometimes they do art therapy. The men do hikes. We teach swimming lessons because they're in Greece. There's a lot of water. Many of them are terrified of the water because they've, had this, trip in a life raft that might have, begun to sink. And we share the gospel with them and in lots of, different ways and opportunities. So that's the main thing that we do there in Greece. And then the other little piece, again, working with probably the most vulnerable people, the most wounded people, I would say, and traumatized people, is I volunteer once a week or twice a week with an organization that works with men and women, and sometimes children even, that have been trafficked to Athens to work in the sex industry. Prostitution is legal in Greece. There are over 200 brothels in downtown Athens. And this organization, it's about 20 years old. They have a staff of people and then a group of volunteers who speak all kind of different languages. The main reason I was asked to volunteer is because I speak Bulgarian, and many of the women who come from Bulgaria, but also other places in Eastern Europe. So we have Russian speakers, Spanish speakers, Arabic speakers, people, volunteers from Moldova, and all these different places that these people come from. Another group that's very vulnerable are, and this is a connection with the refugees, are unaccompanied minor boys. In other words, boys and teenagers who leave their homes in Iran, Afghanistan, and they come by themselves on this terrible, dangerous trip with human traffickers, and end up in Greece, and they're alone, they're homeless, and they get picked up by pimps and traffickers and are forced into this horrible business. So that's the other piece of what I actually am doing there in Athens. But if you have questions about any of that, the refugees, I could talk a lot, and I've gone over. I'm sure you're ready to eat breakfast. But if you're interested in learning more about the refugees or hearing some of their stories, we've heard some really amazing stories. Some of it awful, but some of it wonderful, because some of them have come to know the Lord. And now, even though they're in exile and they can't go back to their physical home, they know that they have a home in heaven. The ministry with the victims of trafficking is in some ways a lot harder, but again, God is at work slowly. So thank you again for your prayers, and it's great to be with you. And I just pray for all of you, that all of us on our journey. I see a lot of you out there that are, my age or whatever, and we're heading to our home, and I do pray for all of you that, as for myself, that's what we would look forward to and be excited about. Thank you.